it's kind of funny because they were asking me when they said in the introduction, do you actually want us to call you an airline dork? And I said, well, yeah, I love this industry, but hearing it out loud here makes me sound probably a little crazy. I realize that. But what I want to do today is talk to you guys about capacity, what we're seeing, a little bit of the trends in the past, why things are the way they are, and then some of the trends we can look forward to. What I do want to ask to start, though, if you can raise your hands, see if I can block the light out here. How many of you are happy with the air service you have in your destination right now? That's more than I thought, like 10 of you. And of those, I'm guessing most of you are probably big hubs or huge leisure destinations, something like that. So this is not a surprise at all. So let's get going. There we go. So what I'm going to do to start, I want to look at over the last 10 to 20 years and show you what's been going on in terms of seats. Because for you guys, what really matters, of course, is the seats that are coming to your destination, right? You don't care about the airline metrics of ASMs and all this stuff. It's how many people can actually get here. So let's start. Large hubs have grown. I don't think anyone is surprised by that. Large hubs, big leisure destinations. There are only so many of these in the US, of course. And big leisure destinations, you're talking about like an Orlando or a Vegas, are pretty unique types of destinations. These have all grown, they've done well. And we'll talk more about this after, but I want to just go through the numbers first. Take a step down toward a more mid-size city, and the news is not as encouraging there. Of course, a lot of these are former hubs, right? Almost every mid-sized city in the middle of the country was a hub at some point, and most of those are gone now, and that's led to a huge decrease in service there. But it's not just hubs that are seeing decreases. You look on here, there's Tulsa, Albuquerque, Tucson. A lot of cities have lost service, and this is over the last 20 years, which you would hope that you would have at least had some sort of increase in 20 years. And then if we go down even further, we can go to small cities, and this has been just as bad, if not worse, in terms of losing service. We're going to be here for a little bit. There are a lot of small cities. So small cities, actually, it's been really challenging because it's almost the perfect storm of 4 or 5 different things working together against you. It used to be 20 years ago or more, you used to see a lot of 19-seat turboprops flying around, right, connecting to a bunch of different hubs. Well, then the federal government changed the rules on operating 19-seat turboprops, made it a lot more expensive to do, and they virtually disappeared. You see very few of those anymore. Beyond that, we have regional jets that came out, which people love flying, and so airlines rushed to introduce them. But of course, those are bigger jets and they're more expensive, and so it again became tougher in some of these small cities to justify it. Over the last few years, we've seen issues with high fuel prices. Just recently, we've seen new pilot rest rules and pilot qualification rules that require much higher number of hours before anyone can even be hired into an airline. And that puts a lot of cost pressure on these low, small regional carriers, and it just makes it tough. And if that's not enough, on top of that, we have consolidation, which has been the mantra of the industry over the last 10 to 15 years. And that's impacted this, but it's also impacted every city. And so we'll move into that. 15 years ago, TWA was sort of on the edge there, but about 15 years ago, most of the traffic in the US came from these carriers. And what's happened in that time? Well, slowly but surely, merger after merger, acquisition, whatever it is. On October 17th, when the US Airways brand disappears for good, we'll be down to these 4 carriers controlling the vast majority of traffic in the United States. And I should say there's a lot of good that comes out of this. You have better networks. So if you're connected to these guys, you can now get to many more places around the world. You also have airlines that are now more profitable. They're investing in their products. They're creating a better experience than you might have experienced before. But in terms of capacity, it creates some challenges because you see the hub dynamics have changed a lot. And I'll give you this example. At some point, these were all hubs at some airline. And now they're not. They're all gone. And the reason for that, I'll use one example. is let's look at Memphis. So Memphis was Northwest's southeastern hub, right? Other than that, it was Detroit and Minneapolis. So the way that Northwest was able to access the southeastern US was through Memphis. And it worked well for them. It wasn't the biggest hub. Sometimes it was profitable. But it was the only way they were really going to get access there. Then they merged with Delta. And Delta walks up and says, Atlanta. Sort of like a mic drop. Because Atlanta is the biggest, best hub that you can find if you're an airline in the southeast US. It's huge. It has tremendous local population, huge business center. It has great connectivity all over. And so this is nothing against Memphis. It's just Delta looks at it and says, well, we're going to keep building up our big hub in Atlanta, and that's where we're going to flow people over, so we don't need the hub in Memphis anymore. And that means that all the traffic that was supported in Memphis through connections deteriorates and falls away. Now, Delta still flies to more places from Memphis than just its own hubs. You see some Florida, there's a little bit of that. But the result is just a huge drop in traffic. And what used to happen, Southwest used to be the savior, right? You saw this in Kansas City, St. Louis, Nashville, Raleigh, all these cities, where when the bigger carrier pulled out, Southwest came in and said, ooh, opportunity, and went in and filled all these niches and connected to big cities and mid-sized cities and created this great network around the US, which to this day, Southwest has a pretty formidable domestic network. But Southwest isn't really doing that as much anymore. You look at some of the hubs that have lost service most recently. Memphis hasn't really seen much there. Southwest isn't in Cincinnati at all. When United pulled down Cleveland, we didn't see a huge increase from Southwest the way that we've seen in the past. And so Southwest has decided to practice capacity discipline, which, if you listen to the government, is now a bad word. You might have heard that the Department of Justice is investigating the airlines for collusion to see if they're all getting together with this strategy of capacity discipline. My guess is this isn't going to go anywhere, the investigation. If I were guessing, I'd say this is more just a political activity, try and make sure that they're keeping them on their toes. To be fair, it'd be really fun if they actually found something. It'd be like tabloid gossip of some backroom dealings, but I don't think they will, is my guess. So what that means is capacity discipline is just good business strategy for the airlines, and it's what they want to do to run a good business, which, by the way, is not something they've been very good at over the last 20 years. This is sort of a new idea to actually try and run your business well in the airline industry. But what it means is that they see the US as a mostly mature market. They expect to grow along with GDP. It's, as the country grows, then we'll grow with them. Of course, some cities will grow faster than others. They'll see more opportunities as they grow, but on the whole, we're not going to see the explosive growth from these airlines that we've seen in the past. So where's the growth coming from in the US? We'll start with the US. We'll talk about international a little bit later. Well, in the US, you have the ultra-low-cost carriers, Spirit, Allegiant, and Frontier. This is where there is tremendous growth right now. These guys are growing very fast. They have a lot of airplanes on order, and they are wildly profitable. Some of the most profitable airlines in the world, in fact. And I know some of you may not have the best impression of these airlines. I've talked to destinations who say, well, that's not our kind of, those aren't the kind of people that are coming to our destination. It's not the right fit, something like that. But I'll say that I think that's a mistake to look at it that way, because this is where the growth is coming, and you can look at other markets to see where this inevitably leads. And if you look at Europe, for example, they've had ultra-low-cost carriers for longer than we have in the US. Ryanair and EasyJet have been around for longer. There are more of them now. But they are hugely dominant with a lot of intra-Europe travel. If you look at the European structure now, if there's a hub, a big airline hub, then there's a good chance you can fly one of the traditional legacy carriers. But point to point everywhere else, and really just the vast, just huge chunk of traffic is being operated by these ultra-low-cost carriers. They are the best option by far in a lot of markets, and they keep growing. But as they grow, Ryanair and EasyJet have realized that there's a lot of opportunity in business travel as well, and they've become much more business travel friendly. They're participating in the reservation systems. They're investing in customer service tools. Even Ryanair has stopped yelling at its customers. If you've ever flown Ryanair, you know what I'm talking about. But they see this opportunity, and so they're moving into that space as well. There is a lot that can happen before these carriers in the US move into that space, but it's probably where it's going to go, and it is where the growth is here. Spirit, so far, these guys have no fear. They go into other big airline hubs, and they just laugh. They have huge presence at Dallas-Fort Worth, Houston Intercontinental, LAX, Vegas, Chicago O'Hare, Atlanta, they're growing. They just go in and say, look, we have really low costs, we can bring low fares, and we're going to fill these airplanes, and they keep growing. Allegiant started on the other end. Allegiant was actually one of the only good news stories for small cities for a long time. Allegiant connected small cities to big leisure destinations, but they've done more than that now. They're here in Austin. They fly to Vegas. They fly to, I believe, Cincinnati even now. And they've moved into Pittsburgh. They've moved into Indianapolis. Some of these cities that are not traditional markets for them, but they see the opportunity because the other carriers aren't taking advantage of these, and they have the low cost structure to go in and be able to do that. So these are the carriers that are worth paying attention to and see what's going on because they are where the growth is. This isn't going to serve everything. This isn't going to help everyone, right? So there are alternative models that are out there that are being tried in a variety of different ways, and here are just a few of them. And I say be careful on these because a lot of times it may require a significant investment of some sort from the airport, from the community, whatever it might be, and just be careful to make sure that it's the right thing for you if this is something you're interested in. Branson's probably a good example of this. Branson Air Express, something that's been going on for years. It's public charters. They bring people in to Branson using that. And that's because if you're an airline and you look at a market, you're not looking at the market on the whole. Right? You're looking at it and saying, is this a profitable route for us, yes or no? And making your decisions based on profitability there. But if you're a destination, you're saying, well, the route itself may not be profitable, but we're bringing people into town and we're hotels and shows and restaurants and building up all this development in our area. And so your math is probably going to look different than airline math. And because of that, an arrangement like this might make sense. Now, I don't know how many of these markets it makes sense to actually do something to this extent, but at least in some, it's something you can think about. There are also other markets that are out there that are trying different things. I point out Elite Airways here. This is an airline that primarily just flies charters under other names, but they have been talking to Phoenix Mesa Airport, which is a secondary airport in the Valley of the Sun. The airport's been looking for people to fly to other destinations. Right now, Allegiant is the only airline at that airport, and it flies to a lot of places, but they were looking for more service, places like Salt Lake and San Diego. And so Elite Airways has shown interest in this to do it under their own name. And so incentives can do that. Of course, when you do this, you're not connected into any of the global networks with any other airlines, so you have to be careful with that. Elite's also not necessarily an airline that has that marketing knowledge and ability in airline space. It doesn't do the customer facing as much, but it's something that is an opportunity to get airplanes going from one city to another. Allegiant's not happy about this. That's a whole nother issue that they've been talking about. On the other side, we have some more business-oriented ideas. So Biz Air Shuttle, this just started from Carlsbad to Los Angeles, so Carlsbad in northern San Diego County, replacing United service. United just pulled out. I'm not so sure how this one's going to go. It doesn't connect to any other airline. It's just a local Carlsbad to LA thing, but they wanted to have something to connect them into the air transport network, so that's operating now. OneJet is really interesting. OneJet is small business jets, and they fly Indianapolis to Pittsburgh to Milwaukee, some of these types of cities that may not have enough demand for a nonstop flight, but there's enough business demand where they think they can do these. What they actually do, they sell flights, and if they don't sell any seats, they just don't fly. And if they do sell the seats, then they go. And there aren't a lot of seats in the first place, so an interesting model that they're trying to use to help stimulate business between these cities that don't have great connectivity. And then Surf Air in the middle. Surf Air is a all-you-can-eat membership organization. So you pay a monthly amount, and then you can fly within their network wherever you want to. Generally works in areas with a lot of population with good secondary airports. So they're in California. They fly to airports like Palo Alto, secondary airports, Santa Barbara, things like that that are really good. But there are other people trying to start this up in the Northeast. They're all over the place. So just a few of the alternative models that are out there that people are trying to say, look, the existing airline traditional infrastructure is not serving all of our needs. How can we try and attack that? Some of these might work, some of these might not, but always worth taking a look to consider what might be an option here. Now let's talk international now. Where's the growth internationally? Middle East airlines. These are all the different destinations from Middle East carriers flying into the US. Some of these haven't even started yet, like Turkish, for example, starts Atlanta. That one hasn't started. Orlando with Emirates, that one hasn't started yet either. But it's coming. This has been in the news a lot lately. I'm guessing a lot of you have heard about the US airlines having an inquiry asking the US government to investigate subsidies at the Middle East carriers. And they're looking at Emirates and Etihad in the UAE, and then Qatar. And the reason is we have open skies agreements. So that means that airlines from both countries have effectively unfettered access to go to the other countries and even through third countries. Now, they can't fly domestic in the US, but they can do pretty much anything else. And the US airlines are saying, well, the condition of this is that you have to have fair competition. And they're saying these guys are wildly subsidized, and so it's just not fair at all. So now the question is, are we going to see all this growth, which we've seen internationally, are we actually going to see this happen briefly and then just stop because the government's going to shut it down? My guess is no, which I'm sure makes everyone here happy because it's more seats into markets. My guess is no for a couple of reasons. Emirates, first of all, it's been a bit squirrely to try and prove those subsidies, and Emirates has fired back with a lot of data. Etihad and Qatar seems pretty clear there's a lot of subsidy there. However, there's a lot more involved in this here. FedEx, for example, uses Dubai for a lot of flying beyond Dubai to transport cargo. They are vehemently against changing anything because they don't want to lose that opportunity. And then there are the military interests, which I won't even get into that, but it's just a very difficult situation, and I'd be surprised if there was much that happened with this. So keep looking for more growth from these. And I think what the US carriers are really concerned about, so far we've only seen one route that's done this, but it's not just from the home airport in the Middle East to the US. Emirates flies Milan to JFK. And so there's this idea that these carriers are going to start flying from their homes to Europe and Asia, and then into the US from there and compete in markets, and then have this unfair advantage in terms of subsidies and costs and all this stuff. We haven't seen much of that, just like I said, just the one route, but still something to think about. But most of these airlines, they're targeting the big cities. They're targeting the big hubs. So this isn't really much help for a mid-sized city at this point. But there are other things going on that are helpful and hopeful for mid-sized cities. So let's take a look at this. This is looking at the 787 here. This is a great airplane for opening up new routes. As Sabine talked about, compared to the 767, it has a couple advantages. It has that tremendous increase in range. It also has a much lower operating cost than the 767. So you can take fewer people further and do it for less money. And that means new routes can actually work that didn't work before. It connects big hubs to more mid-sized cities. So United, this is one that grabbed my eye when they announced it. From their big San Francisco hub, their Asian hub, they started flying to Chengdu, China. Chengdu's probably not a mid-sized city by US standards, but by Chinese standards it is. And it's a route that doesn't work on any other airplane, but it works here. Austin knows all too well how this works, right? The 787, you got that London flight, which has done so well here in Austin that they've actually upgraded it to a 777. Other markets may never get upgraded, but it still works well under a 787. I just flew from San Jose to Tokyo on ANA. Japan Airlines flies from San Diego to Tokyo. Hainan Airlines just started San Jose to Beijing. They fly Boston to Shanghai and Beijing. You have a lot of these different dots that can start being connected. And this is only getting started. United is the only US airline that's had this airplane for any period of time. American just put it into service recently, so it's still feeling it out. Delta hasn't taken delivery of any yet. And it's actually not even just this airplane, it's the new technology in general. We have new 737 MAX, the A320neo, the new narrow-body aircraft. These are going to start flying transatlantic probably the minute they're introduced at some airlines. And that ability to go longer distances with smaller capacity opens up new opportunities to connect these smaller mid-sized cities to hubs elsewhere. And this brings it back around to where we started talking here about how the big hubs are getting bigger. That's not something that's going to change. The airlines want to continue to grow their big home hubs. But the difference is with the new aircraft technology that's coming out, they can now connect more cities into them. So that's great for the big hubs here, but it's also great for mid-sized cities that are now going to be able to be connected to bigger hubs abroad in different places where it just didn't make sense before. The network will keep growing like that, and then the low-cost carriers will continue to try these point-to-point markets that are out there. Successful long-haul point-to-point ultra-low cost hasn't really worked out yet. There have been a couple that have tentatively been successful, but it's been a lot more failure than anything else. But as new aircraft come out, new technology, there's more hope that that's going to continue as well. So I'm going to end on that note. I know that we are finished up here and maybe a little bit late, and I apologize for that. Here's my contact information. I'm happy to chat anytime, and I'll be around after this as well if there's any questions you have for me. Thank you very much.